Am I the only one who is honest to God, sick and tired of listening to both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney accuse each other of serving the banks? Mitt Romney in his whole Bain Capital thing where he sent jobs overseas, obviously, and Barack Obama criticized for aiding in the bank bailouts that continued what George Bush is doing. And they will sit there and they will attack each other over this same issue, claiming, no, Barack Obama supports the big banks with all the bailouts and TARP and everything else. Mitt Romney works for the big banks. He makes his money off the big banks. He was there. He was the CEO. He was the president of one of the big banks. And to listen to the two of them go back and forth on each other, accusing the other of serving the big banks, when in reality, they both do. Am I the only one who's, honest to God, tired of hearing them accuse each other of the same thing, of which they are both guilty? They both serve the big banks. They both serve the biggest capitalist class interests in the entire country. It is not a secret that both parties are funded by the same people. The same top 5 campaign contributors to both the Republicans and the Democrats are coming from the same source. This is obvious. We know this for a fact. It is public knowledge. In fact, it is a law that it be public knowledge and that the public is aware of who is funding who. And yet, for some reason, the public is still engrossed in this entire battle of who serves the banks the most, when it's a completely fraudulent debate or argument, depending on how mature it manages to say. They both do. And the public keeps falling for it. They both serve the big banks. The big banks are the ones who win every single time, no matter what. Except in the odd case in 2008 where their own demand and control of political interests deregulates the entire banking industry and they sink themselves. And yet in the end they still manage to win because they organize themselves to get the bailouts. I mean, are you, the public, ready to understand this yet? They both do. And what I cannot stand is for people to stand there, yeah, well, the Democrats serve it more. Well, no, the Republicans serve it more. Neither one of them really serves it any more than the other. And even if one did serve it more than the other, it would be completely immaterial to the point. And that is the banks own everything. And they fund everything. Thus, they end up with all the power. And what's frustrating is to hear people say, oh, money in politics is the problem. You know, we need to get the money out of politics. We need to get, or to another degree, get the corporate money out of politics, get the bank's money out of politics. Under this impression that if you somehow removed money from politics, which is a literal impossibility, that the democratic system, or the supposed democratic system, would all of a sudden begin to work. Well, here's the really existing material conditions. Money has always been politics. If you go as far back as the Founding Fathers, when they began the political game in America separate from the English royalty, how do you think it worked? People with money funded politicians to run for office, whether they be wealthy slave owners, even banks back then, moneyed interests, rich people. It was the exact same thing. Politicians don't have money to run. Contributions made by the public for the Republican or Democrat Party mean almost absolutely nothing compared to the money that they actually get from businesses. And this goes right back to the very beginning of the United States of America. This is the way it's always been. So to listen to people complain now saying, well, it's private companies giving money that's interfering with the democratic process, it was never any different. Private companies hundreds of years ago have funded this from the beginning. I mean, what is it they think, that just all of a sudden one day, or maybe gradually over time, private companies donations to whatever particular political party just started to corrupt the political process and it turns into what we have today? No. To say that, or to say that money is now the problem, it's the money in politics, that thus implies that going all the way back to the beginning of America, that the people who gave money to politicians then was done, what, out of the goodness of their heart? Merely altruistic to make the political system work? They just gave money to a candidate in order to have the political system work? No. It's been that way since the beginning. Their own moneyed interests that put money into those politicians to do their bidding. That was the whole point, right from the direct beginning. That's why the rich have always controlled who is running for office, and why the regular person has never really had any much of a say. Even the main differences between the Republican and Democrat Party are superficial, and this doesn't really work any different in Canada than it does in the United States or even England or Australia for that matter. That money in politics was always there. The king's power over the people in the feudal era was by his money, because he had the wealth to pay for the body of armed men, the feudal order, the king's kingdom, to put himself in power over other people. It's not any different. Instead of a king, you have, in this example, corporations who pay the money to control the people who are running the body of armed men, the modern liberal bourgeois state. It's not any different. It's not even really anything new, except now you get the illusion that you've somehow had a say in the system by a completely fraudulent electoral system. Not to mention the actual accounts of fraud, like George Bush in the first one where the Supreme Court made a decision, or in 2004 when he didn't actually win the second election either. And there's a documentary called Hacking Democracy, who goes into the company Diebold and all of that, explaining how the second one was stolen. I don't have time to go into that here. Or even the robocall scandal here in Canada, which stole the election in favor of the Conservatives. This has not been any different. You can't sit here and complain that somehow money is now all of a sudden a problem in the political system. Money is the political system, always has been, and in a bourgeois state, it always will be. It didn't all of a sudden one day become a problem. It always was there, and this is what it has always done, to varying different degrees over the centuries, but it's essentially the exact same thing. You're not going to take money out of the political system until you take money, or at least the people who are currently controlling the money, out of society. So long as you have a capitalist system, the capitalists, whether they be bankers, industrialists, arms dealers, or the pharmaceutical industry, are the ones with the money, and thus they are the ones exercising the power.